Before birth, the awakening of consciousness in the womb. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome. Today we embark on a journey into one of humanity's oldest and most profound questions. When does life truly begin? This question has occupied philosophers, theologians, and scientists alike for centuries. Most often we measure the beginning of life by the first cry, the first breath, the moment the body emerges into light. But what if this view is incomplete? What if life-conscious life has been unfolding long before the first breath? To explore this, we will combine two remarkable frameworks: the ancient Tibetan Buddhist text, the Bardo Thödol, commonly called the Tibetan Book of the Dead, and the latest findings from fetal neuroscience, focusing on the remarkable developments that occur after 32 weeks of gestation. What emerges is a vision of the fetus not as a passive cluster of cells, but as an awakening conscious being, already attuned to emotional currents, already absorbing the vibrations of the world outside. In Tibetan philosophy, consciousness is not born at the moment of birth. It is not a sudden spark that ignites when the lungs first inflate with air. Rather, consciousness is a traveler, moving through distinct phases of existence. The Bardo Thödol describes four pivotal transitions: the moment of death, the intermediate state known as Bardo, the pre-birth selection phase, and finally, the entrance into a new body. Of these, the last two stages, the pre-birth choice and embodiment, directly relate to the experience of the fetus. The text provides a striking description. Consciousness is drawn toward the union of parents, sensing the pull of emotion, and enters the body where it is most drawn. This is not simply a doctrine of reincarnation. Philosophically, it illustrates a profound truth. Consciousness responds to emotional vibrations. It is sensitive to the quality of feelings, the atmosphere of connection, the emotional texture of the parental environment. Modern neuroscience provides a strikingly similar insight, but through the lens of physiology and observation. Consciousness does not enter the fetus as a blank slate. From the earliest stages, the fetus carries what can be described as an emotional substrate. Between 28 and 32 weeks, this substrate undergoes rapid development. By 32 weeks, the fetus is capable of distinguishing external stimuli, not merely as sensations, but as emotionally nuanced experiences. In essence, this marks the transition from a reflexive organism to a sentient, emotionally responsive being. Let us examine the neurological changes that define this stage. First, the emotional processing circuits, particularly the connection between the amygdala and the prefrontal cortex, become functional. What does this mean? From this point, the fetus begins to perceive emotional tone rather than raw sensory input. If the mother experiences anxiety, her physiological state, accelerated heartbeat, short breathing, subtle tension transmits to the fetus through the placenta. The fetus interprets these signals as a subtle vibration of uncertainty in the world. Conversely, if the mother is calm, her steady heart rhythm, relaxed musculature, and slow, deep breathing conveys safety and balance. The fetus absorbs these signals, activating the parasympathetic nervous system, and begins to experience a rudimentary sense of emotional stability. Second, the auditory cortex develops sophisticated discriminatory abilities. While the fetus can perceive sound earlier in gestation, after 32 weeks, it begins to differentiate who is speaking and what emotions are conveyed. Modern research confirms that the fetus does not merely hear, it recognizes. The familiar voices of the mother and father are encoded in distinct vibrational patterns, allowing the fetus to respond differently to each. The mother's voice, resonating with internal bodily rhythms, signals safety and attachment. The father's deeper tones introduce contrasting emotional textures, contributing to the fetus's developing perception of relational depth. Even voices of frequent visitors, such as grandparents or close friends, are registered, providing the fetus with a primitive map of social familiarity and security. Importantly, The fetus does not comprehend words or language at this stage, yet it comprehends emotion. The intonation, rhythm, and vibrational quality of speech convey joy, anxiety, sadness, or anger. A mother's laughter, for example, resonates through the body as a complex wave of positive vibrations, signaling a safe and playful environment. Conversely, subtle anxiety or suppressed anger transmits physiological cues that the fetus integrates into its own developing nervous system. Through this process, the fetus becomes not just a passive listener, but an active emotional observer and learner, shaping the earliest foundations of temperament and relational awareness. The third major development at this stage is the emergence of REM, sleep, the fetal precursor to dream consciousness. During REM cycles, the fetus begins to convert sensory inputs into internal imagery, constructing an experiential model of the world. Tibetan texts describe this as consciousness, seeing its own shadow and recognizing itself in it. Through these internal experiences, even without direct sight, the fetus forms a representation of the surrounding world, a world filtered through emotional resonance and auditory patterns. Philosophically, what does this suggest? Consciousness, even in the womb, is relational and interpretive. It is shaped by connection, influenced by the emotions it encounters, and primed for social interaction from the very beginning. From this perspective, birth is not a beginning, but a continuation, a step along a path that began long before the first cry. The fetus enters life already as a relational being, already attuned to emotional signals, already capable of learning and adaptation. As we reflect on this, we are compelled to reconsider the meaning of life's beginning. It is not a singular event marked by physical emergence, but a process of emotional and cognitive awakening. The womb becomes not only a physical incubator, but a stage for the earliest lessons in perception, relationality, and emotional intelligence. By the time the infant is born, it carries with it a pre-existing sense of connection, a first education in the rhythms, tones, and safety of the world, a curriculum taught through the emotional and auditory waves, transmitted by those it first knew. In closing, the 32-week mark in gestation represents more than a developmental milestone. It represents the awakening of conscious, relational existence, the moment when life begins to perceive, respond, and learn in emotionally nuanced ways. This insight bridges ancient Tibetan philosophy and modern neuroscience, revealing that even before birth, human beings are active participants in the creation of their consciousness, forming the earliest patterns of experience that will shape their emotional lives forever. So as we continue to explore the mysteries of consciousness, let us remember, life does not begin at the first breath. It is an unfolding journey, starting long before the eyes ever open, long before the first cry. And within this journey, the fetus is not merely a potential life, but a living, conscious, emotionally aware participant in its own becoming. If this lecture resonates with you, please like, share, subscribe, and enable notifications. Your engagement supports the continuation of these explorations into the deepest questions of human consciousness. The emotional universe of the womb. How a fetus learns the world before birth. As we concluded in the previous discussion, by around 32 weeks of gestation, the fetus has entered a remarkable stage of consciousness, a stage where it is no longer a passive biological entity, but an active, emotionally perceptive being. Birth, as we traditionally imagine it, is not the start of awareness, rather. It is the continuation of a consciousness already awakening within the womb. Today we will explore how the fetus perceives the world, not through sight or reason, but through a vivid spectrum of emotional waves, forming the earliest framework of identity and relational understanding. Imagine for a moment that you are this fetus. You have no open eyes, no direct access to the visual world, yet the universe unfolds around you in pulses, currents, and vibrations of feeling. You experience light not as photons striking a retina, but as emotional luminosity colors and temperatures that permeate the fluid of your existence. The world is not a series of discrete events. It is a living, shifting tapestry of feeling. In this universe, joy radiates as a golden wave, bright and expansive. Worry seeps in as a soft blue mist, subtle but penetrating. Anger flashes like crimson lightning, abrupt and unsettling. Sorrow falls as a gray rain, heavy and lingering. These are not mere metaphors. Neuroscientific studies suggest that by 32 weeks, the fetus is sensitive to emotional tones. Moments of calm or tension are physiologically transmitted through the placenta. The fetus experiences these signals as its own internal climate, integrating them into the developing neural architecture. This is the first stage of emotional literacy. The fetus learns to ask, without words, "What kind of world am I inhabiting?" and simultaneously begins to sculpt, "What kind of being am I becoming?" The Tibetan Bardo Thödol echoes this phenomenology in symbolic language. Consciousness flows without form until it perceives the boundaries of form and recognizes itself as I. The I that emerges is not only the sense of an individual body, but a nascent self that is emotionally attuned and relational. In utero, the fetus undergoes this awakening. The boundaries of self emerge in response to the emotional landscape created by the mother and her surroundings. Let us enter the interior world of the fetus in narrative form, drawing on both Tibetan symbolism and contemporary fetal psychology. Picture yourself in a sea of light and shadow. I awaken in a wave-like darkness, but this darkness is not mere blackness. It is rich with textures, with subtle currents of temperature and vibration. Today's waves are gentle. My mother's breath is slow, deep, and rhythmically warm. I do not yet see, yet I feel cradled by a universe that is safe, that holds me. I stretch, I respond, I exist within a space that is both external and internal, simultaneously intimate and expansive. On other days, the world quivers. My mother's heartbeat accelerates, her rhythm vibrating through my entire body. My chest tightens, my limbs contract. I do not know why, but I feel the unease of the cosmos, a subtle warning that the world can be uncertain, even turbulent. Tibetan texts remind us consciousness does not question reason. It accepts feeling. Feeling becomes seed, and seed becomes character. In this moment, anxiety seeds within me. An early recognition the world can be precarious. Conversely, there are moments of luminous expansion. My mother's laughter travels through her body and into mine. The warmth spreads like a cloud around me. I feel larger, lighter, freer. Consciousness awakens, as the text says. Bright waves rouse awareness. Awareness expands being. In these golden moments, the fetus experiences a first glimpse of what it is, to be itself, nurtured by relational resonance. By 32 weeks, the fetus has already become an observer. It cannot yet reason as an adult might, but it perceives emotional flow, records recurring patterns, and begins to form tendencies based on environmental stability or instability. Crucially, the fetus learns directly from the mother's emotional regulation. If maternal emotions are repressed, the fetus interprets feeling as unsafe, as dangerous, as to be contained. If maternal emotions are gently modulated, the fetus learns that feelings can be regulated and that the world is a manageable space. Let's consider examples. A mother rushing through a hectic morning, heart racing, breath short, voice tense. The fetus experiences a compressed wave of agitation, learning the rhythm of stress, encoding it as a pattern of vigilance. The world is unpredictable. The body must remain alert. A mother walking in sunlight, breathing deeply, her voice soft, movements relaxed. The fetus observes a harmonious flow. Storing the pattern emotions can settle, the environment can be safe, calm is possible. These early experiences lay the foundation for lifelong emotional and behavioral tendencies. The neural architecture of the fetus is mapping the tempo of life itself. Patterns of tension and release, uncertainty and stability, danger and safety. Moreover, the fetus is not merely a passive recipient. It is an apprentice in emotional intelligence. Tibetan texts articulate this beautifully. Consciousness perceives itself through feeling, and feeling becomes a template for character. By 32 weeks, the fetus witnesses, internalizes, and rehearses the art of being in the world. Every contraction of maternal muscle, every shift in voice or breath, is a lesson in relational dynamics, in self-regulation, and in anticipation. The fetus absorbs 4 major lessons. 1. Observing the flow of emotion, sensing rhythm and intensity as currents rather than discrete signals. 2. Recording emotional patterns. Repetition encodes expectation. 3. Forming tendencies based on stability or instability, the groundwork of temperament. 4. Learning emotional regulation by example. How a mother modulates stress, anger, or joy becomes a live tutorial in self-regulation. Thus, the fetus is not merely listening, it is learning to navigate a complex emotional environment, forming the preliminary architecture of personality and relational intelligence. Long before first words are spoken, maternal emotions become climate, breath becomes weather, regulation becomes map. Through these experiences, the fetus begins life as a conscious participant in its own emotional and cognitive development, a subtle, silent apprentice of the world it will soon enter. By reframing our understanding of fetal development in this way, we recognize that the journey to consciousness is not a postnatal event. It begins in the resonant sea of maternal emotion, guided by vibrations, rhythms, and relational cues. 32 weeks in, the fetus is already more than a biological organism. It is a nascent human, equipped with the earliest instruments of perception, learning, and relational awareness. In the next segment, we will explore how these emotional lessons interact with auditory perception, dreaming states, and the initial architecture of memory and selfhood, revealing a prenatal world that is as philosophically rich as it is scientifically astonishing. Ladies and gentlemen, having explored the remarkable capabilities of the fetus, after the 32nd week of gestation, it becomes clear that the unborn child is far more than a developing organism. The fetus is already a conscious observer, a learner, and an emerging spiritual agent, actively shaping the framework through which it will experience life. This perspective is eloquently articulated in the ancient Tibetan text, the Bardo Thödol, Tibetan Book of the Dead, which describes this stage as the moment when consciousness chooses a new light, a new orientation toward existence itself. According to the Bardo Thödol, consciousness sheds the shadows of previous lives and chooses its own new light. This new light is not merely symbolic. It is a practical, spiritual, and psychological reality. In these final weeks in the womb, the fetus begins to establish its core temperament, its fundamental emotional framework, and the parameters for adapting its consciousness to a new physical world. It is a profound transition far beyond the simple growth of neural circuits and a decisive moment when the inner architecture of mind and soul is configured. Let us examine what constitutes the core temperament. Temperament is akin to a software's default settings. It is not easily changed later in life. It determines how the individual processes emotions, reacts to stimuli, senses danger, and feels secure. 4 key dimensions define this early formation. First, the speed and intensity of emotional responses. Some infants react sharply to even minor stimuli, while others respond with remarkable calm and resilience. Second, the baseline perception of threat and safety. Is the world inherently dangerous or essentially safe? The fetus internalizes this through the emotional climate of the mother. Recurrent maternal anxiety instills sensitivity to threat. Maternal calm instills confidence and a sense of stability. Third, the fetus is developing trust in emotional regulation. Does the unborn child learn that emotions can be managed, suppressed, or will naturally resolve? These lessons are absorbed directly from the maternal experience of handling feelings. Fourth, the fetal model of human relationships. Attachment template. The way a mother processes and expresses emotions serves as a template for interpreting social connections. The fetus internalizes early notions of trust, warmth, and relational dynamics. In parallel, the fetal perceptual framework begins to shape how the newborn will interpret the world. Even before birth, the fetus begins to categorize experiences. Is an event a potential opportunity or a threat? Are relationships safe connections or unpredictable hazards? Through these experiences, the unborn child constructs emotional algorithms that will govern responses for a lifetime. Modern neuroscience confirms this. By 32 weeks, the fetal amygdala prefrontal networks are sufficiently developed to receive, interpret, and encode emotional stimuli. The fetus is not passive. It is an emotional observer, a pattern recognizer, and a calibrator of temperament. Consider concrete examples. When the mother cries, the fetal heart rate rises within 30 seconds, accompanied by movement, interpreting not just sadness, but the tension of the world. When the mother becomes angry, the fetus exhibits defensive reflexes, akin to a startled adult. When the mother is calm, the fetus relaxes, displaying a smooth, flowing pattern of movement, reflecting a resonant, stabilizing effect. Repeated exposure to familiar voices or music generate early memory responses, highlighting the fetus's capacity for learning and adaptation. These formative experiences establish the groundwork for personality, emotional style, and relational patterns after birth. The fetus is, in essence, a spiritual and emotional being, already learning from its environment, anticipating challenges, and shaping responses that will last a lifetime. The convergence of ancient Tibetan wisdom and modern scientific observation is striking. The Bardo Thödol describes consciousness entering the body, absorbing emotions, and learning from the environment. Contemporary medicine demonstrates that at 32 weeks, the fetal emotional circuits are operational. The unborn child experiences, distinguishes, reacts, and remembers. The language differs, but the truth is identical. The 32-week fetus is no longer a mere biological entity. It is an emotional human being, a learner, and an observer of the inner and outer world. Every tear, every burst of anger, every calm breath experienced by the mother becomes a classroom, a curriculum for the emerging human mind and heart. In conclusion, the fetus at 32 weeks exemplifies the intersection of biology, psychology, and spirituality. It is a conscious agent, a learner of emotions, and a nascent architect of its own life path. Understanding this profound stage opens new ways to explore the human mind, consciousness, and the origins of life itself. If this exploration inspires you, I invite you to subscribe and activate notifications to continue this journey into the mysteries of human consciousness and the genesis of life.